you say, what's Kabir based around?
It's based on the fact that God is a unitary being. God manifests everywhere. God is absolute truth, absolute existence. And God is beyond gender, names, and forms. God is the absolute, nothing beyond. And so his teaching is based on this. It's a transcendental teaching, and it says that God manifests in all beings equally, in our heart. If I can quote it in Hindi, if you don't mind, I can say that. Sab ghat mere saiya, suni seshna koi. God dwells in every heart. There is no being anywhere that is devoid of the being of God. And so he taught this great equality of all people, all beings, and that we must never hurt one another, never fight on the basis of caste and creed and doctrines and religions. We are all created in the same way. The same blood flows in all our veins. Who is high, who is low? Who created dissensions and inequalities? That you may call God by one name or the other name, it doesn't matter, because God is beyond names. So he taught along this line of universal brotherhood, universal love, impartiality, and love for one another, and to see God in all beings, whether it's human or animal or plant life. God manifests in all things through his omnipresence. And God is also omniscient, absolute knowledge, and God is worshipped by many people in many different ways, but God is still absolute God.
You answered actually quite a few of my questions in that one. so what are the practices in Kabir to access or to promote your relationship with God?
We have foremost, it's called satsang, S-A-T-S-A-N-G, company of those seeking truth. And so we hold services whenever we want, at home. Over here we have every Sunday, like most churches everywhere. And in that we say prayers. We also sing what we call bhajans, psalms, devotional bhajans. And we do meditation. We study his teachings, which we'll call our scriptures. And basically that's what we do. But it's important also to have a spiritual guide. We call the guru, the teacher. And Kabir taught that absolutely we must have a teacher, a spiritual guru, to show the path to you. Think of yourself as a student and there's a teacher. You have to have a teacher in order for you to learn and to graduate. So spiritually we need to graduate also, but we need to graduate in a state of freedom, absolute liberty. And that is the nature of the soul that we are. And that soul is not bound by tradition or caste or creed or doctrine. That soul is absolutely free of all encumbrances. And we are that soul. So this is how we approach the teaching of Kabir.
So what is taking place when you're communing with God?
Yeah, okay. First of all, we must realize God is within. So he gave us a mantra called Soham. Soham means I am the absolute spirit. And we close our eyes. We don't have to, but it's best. Close the eyes, sit very comfortably, upright, and then observe the breathing. He said, just as people tell the beads when they recite prayers, our breath is probably better than the bead in your hand, which can be more distracting. Whereas every breath you take, you utter the name of God, and consciously bring that understanding that you are the Spirit of God. And so you just close your eyes. Maybe I'll just demonstrate it for a little bit. I'm not going to utter words, but just observe. So this is how we concentrate on the breath, and as we breathe in, we mentally recite so, and as we breathe out, it's hum. It becomes so hum. It means that God that dwells in me is the Spirit, and I am that absolute Spirit. And when we think of that identity, while we're sitting in this quietness, and we center our attention here, it's called the trikuti, the third eye, then we commune with God silently within our own self. And I think this is consistent with what Jesus also taught. If thine eye be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. We are seeking enlightenment. And what is a single eye? Certainly cannot be a physical eye. So that single eye is here. It's called the third eye, the spiritual eye. And it's called the trikuti, the point of meditation. So we do this along with studying the scriptures and his teachings, and then living that type of life. It's actually a way of life. Vegetarianism, non-harming of any living creature, accepting God in your life and seeing God in everything. He taught a system called Sahaj Yoga. You may have heard that. Sahaj Yoga means that which is natural, which you are anyway, your absolute self is natural. You don't have to seek it, just be it. And when you be yourself, it's called Sahaj Yoga. Yoga means union. So Sahaj means that which is easy and natural. So we live that type of life where we realize that we are in communion with God every moment of our life. But we have to manifest that through love, understanding, empathy, compassion, non-violence, absolute brotherhood. Those principles we live by.
Can you discuss what are the forces acting against us? And maybe discuss the importance of shutting off the mind, because that seems to be the merry-go-round that humanity is stuck in. Yes. And what are the forces acting against us to keep us from being what we naturally are?
Yes. We have a mind. Mind is full of desires. And desires are distracting us because they try to feed the senses. And he has one teaching we call a shabda, the words. He said, there are 5 young men, and they wake up every morning and fight with the one lady. The 5 young men are the 5 senses, and the one lady is you, the soul. And he said that each one of these 5 young men are connoisseurs. They want their own type of food. So the eye wants certain things, the ears want something else, the tongue wants something else, etc. And he said, this is what causes the confusion, because each one wants to be satisfied in its own way and doesn't care one bit about the others. And so it's a great deal of ego and selfishness manifesting as these various desires. And they distract us because we do not know how to control the mind. And he said, subdue the mind and rise to that region of serenity where these thoughts are not going to trouble you. There are no more desires in your mind. And once you control that, then the enmity, what you say, stopping us from realizing our natural state, are the desires of the mind. And the attachments we have to external things, either to people or to material things or to honor and name and fame, these sort of things. If we can remove these, that's called the attachments, then we can realize that the soul itself has no attachment. It's just pure manifestation. And when we realize that, remove the attachments, remove the power of the senses and desires, then we can realize that natural state of our being.
There are some beliefs, like some Native American beliefs, that they're actually what they would call inorganic beings, that our mind is actually not our own. And some religions refer to that as devils or angels and that kind of thing. Does your belief system have have another force that's actually acting against us, that actually is influencing the mind?
Well, the force he's called Maya. Maya means illusion. And the reason that Maya has this power is because we have not yet identified with our absolute being. Once we know the unitariness of God, then no other power, what is called Maya, can influence you. And this is what liberation is. Liberation from all the attachments and ignorance, what's called avidya, means ignorance, not knowing your true self. So this power of Maya operates because we don't have absolute knowledge. When we realize our identity with the Supreme, then there can be no illusion, no confusion, because we know the truth. And that Maya is the great so-called, you may call it a devil or whatever. But you see, Maya has another aspect to it. God, being absolute being, cannot create anything. How can God create when God is the only being, the causeless cause? So God, according to transcendental philosophy and Kabir's teaching, God does not create. We speak of creation as a matter of convenience. But when God is alone, the absolute being, where is any matter that God can take to create, like a craftsman creating something? If God were to create, then God has to be outside his creation to be the creator. So our teaching is God is not a creator, God projects or God manifests as all beings. That is why God can be called omnipresent. How can God be omnipresent if he were not with everybody at the same time? And omnipresence does not mean God is somewhere individually at one place or one time or another. God being absolute and omnipresence means everywhere at the same time. Omnipotent, all the power is God. Omniscient, all knowledge is God. So when we approach God from this way, there is no confusion. Maya has no effect on us. But as I was saying, God being absolute being could not create because he had to use energy. Maya is that creative energy of God. So this Maya is coexistent with God. And God projects Maya out of his own being. And it's this Maya that brings about the creation of the universe. So that is how Kabir explains it, and I understand it.
That's very cool. How would you describe the force, love, within the context of God?
It is said that God is love, and love is God. Kabir said, wherever love is, there God is. You cannot buy love in a store. You cannot grow it in a garden. And whoever wants love, whether you're king, whether you're a subject or a pauper, you have to surrender your head. What it means is to give up your ego. Because love cannot be in your heart if you have ego harboring inside you. Because God will not have anything to do with your ego. As soon as you manifest ego, you're separating yourself from God. You want a separate existence. That's what ego means. So this love then is universal, let's say an attribute, an emotion, a feeling. It's very hard to define. You can only experience love. So he taught that speaking of love does not mean you know love. Prem prem sab koi kahe, prem na chinhe koi. At prahar bhija rahe, prem kahave soy. In Hindi, he said that speaking of love is not love. Everybody talks of love, but that's not love. But when you're immersed in love 24 hours a day, then that is love. And this love is something we must feel because of the unity aspect of God in all beings. Therefore, our love must be universal with no strings attached.
You mentioned something that's kind of a paradox, because you mentioned that there is something outside of God. So that's kind of a paradox. If God is everything, that the ego is separate from that.
Yes, in the sense that it is based on ignorance, our ignorance. Otherwise, there's no separation. Because we are ourselves part of the being of God. Because God is universal being. And we cannot have an existence, including our ego, were it not for God to be there. But it doesn't mean that the ego exists outside of God. Because everything that exists in the universe, whether through us or through any other agency, also has to come from God. It's the same idea that there cannot be a heaven or a hell. Because if God is omnipresent, then He's got to be in hell too. Well, people don't like to believe that God is in hell. But hell cannot have an existence without God. Neither can heaven. Neither can this world. So it's all a totality of existence, including our ego. It's all still in the being of God.
So I guess this is the grand question, ultimately, is why this challenge to our awareness? In other words, why is there the challenge of ego? Why are we presented with this challenge? Why particularly humans, I would suppose? Why did God present us with this challenge?
I think the idea is for us to get unfolded, to educate ourselves and to learn. It's like a child. Why should a child be challenged to go and graduate in anything? So God has put us in the world in order to find our own true nature through a learning process, through a process of evolving into a higher state of consciousness. And I think this is our purpose in life really, is to eventually, apart from living a life and eating and drinking, sleeping, these are materialistic things. But our real purpose in life is to unfold into an awareness that we are spirit, and to see this spirit as universal spirit. So this would be what Kabir Sahib's teaching is.
Is there a benefit to God with the unfoldment of the human perception, of the individual perception in Kabir?
If there's a benefit?
Well, some beliefs believe that the purpose for all of this is because the universe is becoming aware of itself. That it's becoming aware of itself, and our struggle is representative of the universe's mission.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes.
Does that fit in with Kabir's?
Well, yeah. I mean, you can think of theistic belief and atheistic belief. I mean, atheism will have nothing to do with what we're talking about. But we accept God as universal being, as I mentioned before. Could you repeat that question so I can be clear in my mind what I'm saying?
So, I was bringing up a belief system of that the reason for our coming into being is because God, or the universe, or the Great Spirit, whatever they call it, is becoming aware of itself through us becoming aware of ourselves, because we are.
Oh, yeah, I see what you mean. Yes. The whole universe is, let's say, unfolding. Let's say there are other creatures, other than human beings. They're also on a process of life. It's like climbing a ladder or graduating from grade 1 to grade 2. The whole universe is in this process of evolving. And if you follow the scientific method, okay, the Big Bang, and then the expanding universe, well, that may be true for scientists, but what does a spiritual person make of it? What created a Big Bang anyway? What was it? Was there something before what you call this unitary thing? So if we would accept the scientific view that there's the Big Bang and then the universe is expanding and the stars are exploding and falling back on themselves, creating white dwarfs and black holes, it's a continuing process. But there's a time we can conceive, just like our sun might be in 5 billion years, may cease to exist. Maybe our earth will cease to exist. There's the concept that there's a primordial matter that's imbued with spirit and with energy and intelligence. that is evolving into everything as we see it, but they can also devolve. And in the Indian system, they're called the yugas, the great cycle, like the Golden Age, the Bronze Age, Silver Age, the Iron Age. It's one way of saying that, okay, there's an evolution taking place in the whole universe. And a time will come when all of this will return into an original sort of either matter or substance or force or being. And then it will unfold again. There's no end to existence. We cannot say when there was a beginning and when there will be an end, because we exist in infinity. And we don't know what infinity is. It's a concept we think we know, but we cannot experience infinity, just as we cannot experience eternity or omnipresence. These are concepts we talk about, but without knowing what they are. We just have a vague idea of what they could be. So we live in this, let's say, expanse, and there's evolving of the universe, devolving of the universe in endless cycles without end. So that would be my conception, and I think that's what Kabir is teaching us.
So as an individual awareness, what is the ultimate accomplishment in Kabir for the individual? What is the ultimate achievement of spirit?
The ultimate achievement of spirit is to know itself. We must know that we are not this physical being. This is like a dwelling. Like you have a house, you live in it. You are not the house. And the house can never say, I am Mr. So-and-so. So the person who dwells in the house is the being like the soul that dwells in this body. The soul does not die when the body dies, because that will mean the end of a certain existence. But existence is absolute and eternal, and we are part of that. Therefore, we cannot die and be nothing. But the body recycles itself. It returns to the earth and to the atmosphere. And the soul itself just keeps on, taking on a new body, just like we take new clothes or we build a new house. But the soul is ever existent, eternal.
That brings me to my next subject here, death. How would you describe the force death?
Death is a transition. As I just mentioned, there cannot be an end to existence. Because God exists, therefore there has to be existence. In our philosophy, it's called Sat Chit Ananda. Existence, consciousness, and bliss. That's the nature of God, it's the nature of the soul. So what is death? Death just means a transition from this present state of our being into another state of being, which can be human, it can also be animal, because all things are related, interchangeable, because the spirit is the same in the universe. So death would mean then a termination of our present body, circumstances, location, time, these sort of things, and then changing into a different body, let's say. Because since we embody consciousness, consciousness cannot be destroyed. It has to exist. It has to exist in another form. And so we just change our form, just as we change clothing.
So do you prepare for that ultimate moment? I guess for all of us, that's the one defining moment of our lives.
True. That is true. To pray for that means that, as he said, Kabir said, not to ever fear death, because you do not know where death will strike you. But do not have pride of ego. And I will quote him in Hindi. Kabir garv na kijiye, kaal gahe hai kesh, na jane kab mare ho, kya ghar kya pardesh. Said, oh Kabir, don't have pride and vanity. Death is figuratively holding you by the hair. You do not know when it will make a meal of you, whether you're at home or in some foreign place. So never fear death. Death is part of existence. There's a birth, which we joy over, and death, we sorrow over. But he said, "Oh Kabir, when I was born, I was crying and everybody was laughing. Let me live such a life that when I leave this world, I must be laughing while the others are crying." So that's his definition of what we should be at death. We must always expect it, have no fear. Death is only a transition.
And what is the purpose behind death? Why are we given a limited amount of time? Why is there an end date to us?
Yeah, I think that depends on what we call this integration of material, the way it is put together, that in time all things age and decay and die, including nature, trees, mountains, everything. There's a continuous change, and I think we are part of that process. And I think death gives us that opportunity that since this body is material, is wearing down, a time will come when it will not serve its purpose, and therefore we must change this body into another body so we can carry on. But as I mentioned earlier, there's a progression. Let's say, call it upward. It means towards God. There's a progression we are on. We are on this ladder, climbing to God, not knowing that God is already connected with us. This is where the avidya or the ignorance comes in. When we realize God is already with us, there's no ladder to climb. You just have to be what you are. That is Sahaj Yoga. And Sahaj Samadhi means that absolute union with God that you already have, but your ignorance does not allow you to realize that knowledge.
So is the ultimate potential then for a human being to maintain their awareness past death? Is that the ultimate? In other words, can you maintain your personal consciousness and also have your I don't know what the right word is, to be elevated enough to
Well, you see, the consciousness itself doesn't have any particular attribute. It is with you. It's the nature of the soul. And so this consciousness goes with you. And if you have gone up to, let's say, grade 4 or 5 in this life, then next life you're likely will go into grade 6, 7, whatever, as the case may be. So there's always a progression towards ultimate knowledge of reality. And wherever we stop in this life, we'll have to take up again, provided you're not doing such evil things that you may regress. And I don't think regression is necessarily a part of our evolving into higher consciousness. So what all the spiritual teachers have told us is that use this life wisely, elevate yourself, have a clean mind, realize your conscious being, and progress on the spiritual journey. Wherever you're at, see if you can go a step higher. And when you get a step higher, try to go higher still. And this is not an external path. It's an inner path of unfolding of the mind and of the consciousness and of the intelligence, so that you become spiritual beings and know that you are spiritual beings.
Do you still struggle with regressive tendencies?
Yes, I do. I'm a human being, and I'm still on that path. I'm trying to improve myself according to the ability I have and the instructions I get, studying, meditating, that sort of thing. But to reach that ultimate state, to be without all the struggle, is when you have connected with God. Until that point, we all have to struggle.
What exercises or advice can you give to people if in those moments, you know, in those moments where all of a sudden you're twisting, something's getting twisted, you're being distorted.
Mm-hmm.
If you're conscious enough to maybe feel that, what advice does Kabir give, or do you give, to kind of?
Yes, the important thing is to have the presence of mind. That distractions may come in. Your mind might go off on a tangent. So once you have the presence of mind, it's called mindfulness, that you can bring your mind back into what you were concentrating on, what you were doing. So you can always bring yourself back to the center. It's not hard to do. Distractions are all around us, but as long as we understand these are peripheral things, they're not the central thing in your life. Some things you can either take or leave. They're not absolute in themselves. What is absolute is your being. And once you are centered in that, you can know when you can withdraw your mind from this or from that and center yourself again. I think it takes some exercise, and that's what yoga is all about, is to teach yourself to center, to know who you are and what you're doing, be mindful, and then the other distractions are not going to be much of a problem because you can overcome them.
And is there also a breathing component to that
Yes,
as well?
yes, yeah. There's regular breathing. The reason why breathing is so important in these spiritual practices, because it's very natural to do, it's there with you, and if you concentrate on it, then as you breathe in, you can feel you're breathing in peace, you're breathing in harmony, you're breathing in spirituality, you're breathing in love. And as you breathe out, you can feel you're breathing out stress, tension, mental disturbances. You can breathe them out. And once you have this concept going, breathing in peace and breathing in love and breathing out impurities, that helps to make you feel what you really want to achieve. Because then you know what is the real thing, what is the love, what is the lack of love, what is pure, what is impure. You can differentiate. And this breathing helps you. And while this mental process is going on, of purifying, loving, etc., you also have the stability of the mind, because it's concentrating entirely on the breath, and therefore it's not distracted. And if you close your eyes, there will be no visual disturbances. And we don't close our ears naturally, but you do not pay attention to anything that's out there. You still hear things, but your mind does not go after them. It's neutral.
Yeah, I just was speaking with a Sufi teacher, and he said something that was something I never looked at it, which is what you just mentioned, that fasting is also for your senses. Mm-hmm. It's for your ears and for your...
Oh, yes.
You know,
yes.
It's basically like what you just suggested.
Yes,
it's letting it all kind of...
It really
is. Very cool, very interesting. Purpose, how would you describe our intent? How do you describe the force, that force in the universe, that we have? Maybe some people call it free will. I'm not sure that's what it is, but there's obviously something within us that makes us focus our attention. What do you want to call it, purpose or intention? What do you make of that force?
Yeah, that force, I think, is based on the fact that the soul is spirit. It must have an affinity with spirit. Which is the ultimate spirit? We say God. And it's like you're a child and you have parents. You have an affinity. You're sort of related. So the soul that we are, being spirit, God is spirit, the soul has an affinity. Our mind and our desires can distract us from realizing our infinite connection. So our intention really is to know that we want to unite with our source. Our source is that which is within us. We are connected with our source. Therefore, our intention is to realize our connection with infinity.
Do you have an idea why the world is so far away from the path that seems to be a better, smoother road for us all?
Well, we're dealing with human beings. Many people do not care, not caring at all for this type of thing we're talking about. Yet, they do not think where they came from, who made them, who created them, or who are they? Okay, they might say, well, we're people, or we're animals. Biologically speaking, we're animals. What is keeping them, or keeping the world in turmoil, is a lot of ego, greed, hate, anger, covetousness, jealousy. The sort of things that we want to remove from ourselves. The majority of people, unfortunately, do not even care to think whether they should remove themselves from these things. This is part of their life. They wake up, they're involved in it. They go to sleep, they're involved in it. And that is their pattern of living. That is why we have spiritual, enlightened masters coming into the world. Even among these people who are causing turmoil in the world, to teach them there's another way of life. But sometimes people take those same teachings and turn them around, personalize it, and reinterpret it, and do the things that the teaching was meant to remove. And really what it comes down to is ignorance of one's true nature. The yoga system and Indian mysticism call it avidya, means ignorance of your own reality. Because if all the people causing turmoil in the world were aware, were knowledgeable about what they really are as the Spirit of God, and the same Spirit dwells in all beings, as Kabir taught, with your very eyes, when you look around, see the beautiful form of God everywhere. Because God is omnipresent. Everywhere you look is God. Now, if people choose to shut themselves away from this knowledge, then of course they can do all the bad things in the world. But sometime, once in a while, people can turn around from their evil ways into, spiritual ways. It has happened in history where tyrants and evildoers have turned around and become spiritual and have become great examples of what spiritual life should be.
You mentioned Maya as sort of as a contrast to the source, God. It seems almost odd that it seems imbalanced, at least in regards to humanity. Do you regard it as there are forces of good and evil, or maybe you have different words? Is there two forces, opposing forces?
There are in our natural way of living in this world. There's good and evil. In our system, it's called duality, Dwight. So there's the philosophy of Advait, this is monism, and Dwight, dualism. So in the world, as long as we do not realize we are unitary being with the Spirit of God manifesting as all things, then we are in a world of duality. There's opposing forces like good and bad, up and down. But Spirit doesn't have any duality. God does not have an up and down or a good or a bad or here or there. God is beyond all the things we can imagine and talk about. And that Spirit is what God is. And when we realize that unity and that unitary being in all existence, then there's no evil and no good. It's just existence. And so the opposing forces just fall away by themselves. They just don't exist.
you describe what is taking place personally, with you personally, when you're meditating, when you're trying to commune with that source? Can you just, I don't know if maybe it's too personal, but can you describe what happens to your being?
Yes, I think this can be different with different people. But for me now, it brings a stillness of my mind, and it allows me to focus on what could be a universal attribute, like the nature of myself. I mentioned earlier, we use the mantra Soham. I am that infinite absolute being. But we don't know that intellectually or rationally. That is something we have to feel. And to the extent that you're able to feel that, you are being enlightened. But when you're on the path, we have to be content with the fact that we can still our mind. We can at least sit quietly for half an hour, maybe an hour, without moving. Watching our breath, that must be steady, rhythmic. You know, when we're stressed out or our mind is running hither and thither, our breathing becomes haphazard. But in this meditative stance, the breathing becomes harmonious, quiet, rhythmic, and our mind is still, and we begin to feel a sense of peace and a sense of connection. Like this awareness that we are, a consciousness, it expands, and you don't see yourself as a human being. You're not even aware that you're a body. You're not even aware that you are a mind or intelligence. All of these things sort of fall away from you, and you're aware of that absolute consciousness that you are. And this is what I experienced, that this is a universal consciousness, and you are it.
How do you see Kabir in relation to religions? And I mean, I'm sure a lot of people say that, you know, most religions are going to the same place. They're just trying to get there from different directions. Do you subscribe to that sort of?
Yeah, to some extent. But Kabir was more emphatic on having personal knowledge. Although we may go, religions or religionists say that there are different paths leading to the same God. But Kabir tells us that we must have knowledge. It is only knowledge that can set you free. Ignorance can cause bondage. And we must know, have that knowledge, and do not get sidetracked by beliefs. For example, some people believe absolutely you must go on a pilgrimage, or you must go to church, or you must do this or that ritual or this scripture. He said, leave all of these alone. You are above all of them. You are the Spirit of God. Know that. And that is what we must try to attain.
Okay. You're very eloquent. You're providing a lot of good, a lot of
Thank you.
very good stuff. Well, I think we've pretty much covered everything. Maybe I'll just ask one more time, and I'm sure you've probably gone through all this, but if you're recommending to humanity the steps towards inner peace, which leads to the next step, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just a matter of breathing? Is it changing their philosophy, I suppose? Obviously, it's a very materialistic world we live in.
Yeah.
Lots of distractions. I mean, distractions are so distracting.
True.
Is the best recommendation just to meditate? Is that what you would suggest?
I think meditation is the best path. And anybody listening to this, I would recommend to them, seek to meditate. Because meditation is not reading a scripture. It's not reciting words. It's not imagining things. Meditation means to free yourself from all of this and realize the unity of all existence. And all existence depends on a unitary being. That unitary being is in a unitary universe. We're not in a multiverse. We're in a universe with a unitary being. all of us are like organs or parts making up one being. Just like organs of your body make up one human being. Just so all the things in nature, in the universe, they're all different parts of one being. And that being we call God. And I think everybody should try to come to this understanding of the unitariness of being, the absoluteness of being, the love that manifests in this absolute being. We are all the same. We're all one human being. So we don't think of races and creeds and doctrines or religions and castes. These are all superficialities. They are created by man. God only created human beings. Human beings created differences and caused confusion. If all people could realize we're all the same in the eyes of God, then we will all truly live as brothers and sisters. There will be universal love manifesting in all our hearts, and all the confusion and difficulties being perpetrated in the world right now will automatically cease, because they have no place in absolute being. And we must all strive for that.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I hope this has a little bit of a push in that direction. That's the intention behind it anyway.
Yeah, thank you.